In terms of Bitcoin being a safe haven, when everyone's trying to kind of flow out of other currencies, do you see it as a potential threat to the US dollar? Before I ask this next question.
I don't think so, at least in the short to medium term. If you think about it, how many people here have 100% of their net worth in Bitcoin? Nobody, right? Nobody does, right? Okay, how many of you here spend more than 50% of the currency that you spend is in Bitcoin to buy things? Nobody, right? And so it's no different than gold or real estate or even stock portfolios in that sense. People are looking at this as an allocation from an investment standpoint, and they're holding it. Every single investment asset is a speculative tool. And so maybe what we can talk about a little bit is like most of the things that you've been taught about investing are wrong, right? And when I say that, it really, really upsets kind of the legacy world, but it's true. So first of all, they're like, oh, that's just for speculation. Warren Buffett speculates with hundreds of billions of dollars a year. That dude's a gambler, right? You can dress it up, you can put the suit and tie on, you can read the annual reports, you can hold your whole carnival out in Omaha, but at the end of the day, you're a gambler. That's what investing is, you're taking risk. And so if you look at that, Bitcoin is no different than any of these other assets. The second thing is that Bitcoin is the only truth teller in the market. And what I mean by that is it's the most free market that we have. There's definitely things that are wrong with it, and I wish that it could be even freer than it is. But if you look at the way Bitcoin performed in terms of inflation, Bitcoin ran up before inflation hit. So one of the misconceptions in investing is when inflation was high, Bitcoin was falling. That must mean Bitcoin is not a good inflation hedge. But what people forget is that markets are forward-looking. If I know that inflation is coming, or I believe inflation is coming, I don't wait for inflation to come and then move my assets. I move the assets in anticipation of the event. And so in 2020, when everyone said high inflation is coming, they're printing trillions of dollars, they've dropped the interest rate, people moved assets. Bitcoin went from $10,000 to $60,000. High inflation hit, Bitcoin stayed high for a while. But in November of 21, when all of a sudden the Federal Reserve started to say, we are going to bring markets down, we are going to increase interest rates, Bitcoin fell. And everyone's like, see, it failed. But no, actually, Bitcoin told you the truth. Bitcoin led markets and said, we are going to go down in price, and so are all these other markets. And then you saw stocks, real estate, everything else kind of follow. And so what that ultimately leads to is that the efficient market hypothesis, which majority of investors base their investment decisions on, majority of the mainstream media base their perspective of financial markets on, and I would even argue majority of the market itself is based on this idea of the efficient market hypothesis, which basically says everyone given the same information has the same knowledge and therefore perfectly priced into an asset. That's like the dumbest thing in the world, right? Like literally, just think about this for a second. We have an entire multi-trillion-dollar financial system that is built on a lie. And the reason why I say that is because how many people in here know that the Bitcoin halving exists? Right? Okay. How many people in here know when it is next? Some people. How many people in here think that the Bitcoin halving is bullish and will lead to a higher price? Okay. How many people in here think that the Bitcoin halving is going to lead to a lower price? Couple hands. Now, why is that interesting? We all have the same information. We know that the halving exists, we know when it is, but we have a different perspective on what's going to happen. So if I tell you, I can in advance tell you next quarter, Apple is going to make $100 billion in profit. Some of you will be like, oh my God, I'm going to go buy Apple stock because that's going to be this great performance. Some of you will take that same piece of information and you will say to yourself, well, I thought they were going to make 120 billion, so they're going to actually miss, and therefore I should short the stock because I think it's going to go down. The efficient market hypothesis is not real. And the reason why that's important is because the only thing that is real is the market. There is no efficient market. It is an inefficient market of people who come together, who express a view, and they trade. They take positions. And so Bitcoin having this free market, if Bitcoin goes down 50% in a day, there's no circuit breaker. There's no stopping it. No one steps in and says, hey, let's halt trading for 15 minutes, right? I joke with people like, that's little boy stuff. Wall Street needs those guardrails. This is a free market. And so if you then look at it and you say, hey, if you then look at it and say, they're sleeping right now. Why are the assets not trading? Why are stocks not trading right now? The US stock market is closed more hours a year than it is open. Why? It's because Americans have created a system that works for Americans. But there's a whole global base of people who want to participate in the capital markets. And guess what? 86% of all trading of Bitcoin happens outside the United States. We're just a small fraction of the percent of people who participate in this. And so when Americans are sleeping and other people are awake around the world, they can't participate. Why is that? Well, maybe America has to be a little bit more humble and say, hey, we're playing a global game now. 24/7, 365, this thing trades in a free market. And so you can imagine, well, what would happen if the stock market, that happened? They would never let it occur, right? Because it's all about control. It's all about trying to push all this trading into a short period of time. And so it goes back to this idea that Bitcoin is the free market. And what we have seen over and over and over again over the last couple of years is that everything else is a lie. Bitcoin is the only truth teller in financial markets. CPI data, people in here will think it's a lie. Some people will believe it. People will look at asset prices. They'll say that it's a lie. But what we do know is that Bitcoin continues to trade 24/7, 365 with hundreds of millions of people around the world. And it seems to be able to tell us what is coming down the pike in all of these other financial markets. And I think it's worth at least watching it. Doesn't mean you got to buy it, doesn't mean you got to trade it. But if you watch it, it will tell you what's happening better than almost any other asset.